Congresswoman Waters. Welcome to Barbara's Banter. We are so grateful for your time today with so much going on Capitol Hill and in this nation. So thank you for being with us today.
Well, you're so very welcome, and thank you for inviting me. Of course, you know, as we talk about women's history and celebrate women, you are at the top of the list.
Oh, my goodness. Thank you.
You're a businesswoman, a strategist. You have headed the organizations in the Washington area, CEO of the DC Chamber of Commerce for 12 years. You have absolutely demonstrated that women can do it, and that not only can women do it, you are multifaceted. And I'm very pleased to be with you. I've heard about you. I've talked with my niece about you. And
so I got a host of questions for you and topics to talk about, and I know we're going to run out of time, but let me start with this. You were the first woman and the first African-American to chair the House Financial Services Committee. I've watched some of those hearings where you really were holding people accountable. Please describe those experiences, particularly in the very beginning. And did you witness whether your colleagues on either side of the aisle or the witnesses attempted to patronize you because of your gender?
Well, thank you very much for, recognizing that I was and the first woman and the first Black to serve as the chair of the Financial Services Committee. Now, I was very fortunate in that when I first came to Congress, they threw me on what was the learn a lot about banking and a lot about financial services the hard way. And it was very difficult coming in as a new member of Congress and being thrown on that committee. But that committee was being exited by so many who had gotten in trouble because there was a big scandal going on at the time.
Right. I remember.
I sat there, I took the blows, I listened, and I was fortunate in the years that I served, all the way up through being a subcommittee chair with people like Barney Frank. I learned an awful lot. And so when the opportunity presented itself, I was well positioned and I wasn't going to take no for an answer. And so I got the support that I needed in order to, become the chair. And of course, there are challenges that you challenge me and trying to, get his word in ways that was inappropriate. I basically said reclaiming my time very calmly over and over and over again and shut him down.
Well,
and
that phrase became very famous, reclaiming my time.
Well, so it helped me to get a reputation for others who are coming before my committee who think they can overtalk me, if they can disregard my instructions, that is not to be done in my committee. And so, yes, it was rough, and there have been a lot of obstacles along the way, but I arrived at the point where I certainly was in control. And now that the opposite side of the aisle, the Republicans, have taken place, I'm not the chair anymore, I'm the ranking member. And the ranking member is in a position where we have to challenge the opposite side of the aisle. We have to question them. You have to really be on the lookout for ways that they try to undermine and not tell the truth. And so now I'm in the real fighting mode where I will be taking them on from time to time. But it has been and is a great committee that oversees all of the financial services agencies, all of Wall Street, all of the insurance, all of banking, the International Monetary Fund, the World, Fund, the World Banking Fund. And so it has been not only a challenge, but a great learning experience, and I've loved every minute of it.
Oh, well, that's excellent. And one of the things when I was devising my topics and questions for the day, this hadn't happened yet, but I cannot let you leave without us talking about what's going on in banking today, whether it's with Silicon Valley Bank, Signature, Republic, and then of course in Europe, we've got Credit Suisse that's in trouble and is being bailed out. And I just thought, do you have any thoughts about that at all?
Oh, absolutely. As a matter of fact, not this past weekend, but the weekend prior to that, when we first learned about the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank, we were absolutely consumed, all weekend with trying to figure out what was going on. We had the Federal Reserve, we had the FDIC, we had the Treasury, the President's office, everybody was involved. This came as a bit of a shocker. But when you look at that bank and you recognize that there were red flags that was presenting themselves long before this collapse, you realize that there was not enough oversight and that some of the deregulation that had been done by the opposite side of the aisle had put them in a position where we didn't stress test them in the way that we should. So this was a go-to bank for the startups. And so he had captured all of that business, and working with the venture capitalists, they basically put together the kind of operation that would gear them toward the bank. The venture capitalists would put in money, the bank would put in money. And so the bank then controlled them, and they had to have all of their deposits there. And the bank did not worry about whether or not they were going to be insured or not. He knew, they knew. That it was only up to $250,000 that you're insured by FDCI, and so they had 94% of all of their deposits were uninsured,
Because
and so
they were
we're going to
above.
take a close look at that.
So they were above the $250,000 level.
Right.
Right. So
absolutely.
Has the administration, in conjunction with members of Congress and Treasury and the feds and everybody that you named that's engaged, do you think that we've come up with the right solution to solve at least the immediate issue? I know there's some longer term things that have to be done, but have we put a stopgap and we can all feel comfortable but where we are today?
Yes, Barbara, I really do believe so. We took some unusual actions, and the business of insuring everybody, despite the fact you were uninsured, was an extraordinary step and decision that was made. But what was so important about that decision was that so many of these startups and families were waiting for their paycheck. And the banks, as you know, controlled their payroll, and they were the ones who basically operated the payrolls, et cetera, et cetera. And so in order to not only take care of these families who were expecting to have their paycheck, we did not want contagion to sit in, where people would line up at the banks demanding their money. A run on the banks would have been a catastrophe for this country. And so, yes, we have settled a lot, and we have built some confidence, and all of our small banks and our regional banks are operating. They're fine. The depositors don't have any problems. We didn't get a run on the bank. But now I want to tell you what's extraordinarily important, and that's that the international community has taken a look at this, and they said, let's get together. And so 5 central banks in 5 countries have now gotten together to take a look at what's going on in their countries to see if they can avoid what has happened here with Silicon Valley Bank. And in all of this, it was determined that Credit Suisse had to go, that they have been operating under suspicious conditions for many, many years. The Saudi bank that had always supported them pulled out. And then the central bank pulled in to give them the loans that they needed. But there were a lot of folks who thought that's not enough. And so just in the last 48 hours or so, they've been sold. And they were bought almost pennies on the dollar. Yes. So that's a great thing. It lost value. And so with the international community looking at what's going on, the 5 biggest central banks in the world coming together to say what we've got to do is make sure that there's not a systemic collapse in the world, because it is easily triggered when certain banks like Lehman Brothers, remember in 2000.
Oh, no, I remember that. I was on the.
Remember that? Yes.
Yeah.
So
I was
I
on.
think
Yeah, I was
we're
on.
on good footing.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. Hearings. Yes. Yes. We're going to do real investigations. We're going to have hearings. Everybody's going to get involved. Some changes are going to be made. I think that we're now able to help people to understand why you can't deregulate, that these banks are very, very important to our entire lives and our economy. And so they've got to be safe. So we're going to be doing a lot of hearings, a lot of investigation. But I think people can feel comfortable that we certainly have taken care of what could have been a real problem for our banks.
Well, we're delighted and glad that you're there to help safeguard all these issues and on the international basis, because we really can't operate just as one country now. Everything goes across the borders. There are no borders with some of this stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's important. You know, this is such a critical time in our history for women, particularly for women of color. We have the first Black female vice president. We have the first Black female associate justice of the Supreme Court. We had the first female Speaker of the House and Democratic leader just completing her tenure last year, and has to be considered the most successful Speaker ever of the House. Yet this last year, the Supreme Court decision took away our reproductive rights. So we've had so many gains, yet this huge loss. And I guess my question to you is, how do we reconcile this? Can we reconcile this, the gains, but this loss that took us back 50 years?
Well, Barbara, let me tell you this. You mentioned these women, Black women who are in these terrific positions, the vice president and the associate justice on the Supreme Court. It wasn't easy to get there.
Oh, I know.
As a matter of fact, the way that they treated Ketanji Jackson Brown was seen by the world. And even some of their right wingers and more conservative ones had to be ashamed of what was displayed in trying to get that confirmation. But she held herself so beautifully. She conducted herself in such a great fashion until she had to get it. She had to have it. But all through it, you can even recognize that she was perhaps having gone through her years in her career, having been successful in everything that she was done. To be in front of the Supreme Court and be treated in that manner was a shocker and even brought tears to her eyes. But she maintained, and she's there. And that certainly is a huge step in the direction for the potential for Black women. And also with our vice president, it was difficult. The Russians even played in on attacking her and having people believe certain things about her as the campaign was going on. But what we've got to do is we've got to know that when we obtain these positions, it's not going to be a cakewalk, that there will be attempts to undermine and to make sure that you're not successful. But we're doing well. And I'm so proud of Black women who are in New York, the Black Attorney General in New York, who's doing all the work that she's doing. And I think that the Associate Attorney General or something similar to that in Atlanta, who's doing the great work that she's doing. So, and what we found in Atlanta, Georgia was Black women came together and they registered people to vote. They increased that voting, and we almost had a Black woman governor but it was literally stolen from her. But Black women are on the move. And certainly I think that we have all decided the day is over for us to take a back seat, for us to think that somehow we're not capable, and for us to think that somebody is smarter than we are, or for us to think that, oh, it's impossible to obtain these positions. We are on the move, and it's being demonstrated day in and day out. Women in general are on the move. And when you talk about that decision that came out of the Supreme Court on abortion, I want you to know we've been fighting this for years, and we're never going to give up. We're never going to say they're too strong, they're too powerful, we can't get around them. They come different ways of attacking our rights to control our own body. And they come up with ways why even they want to arrest women in certain states who take pills. They want to arrest women for getting an abortion. They want to arrest doctors. They want to close down clinics, on and on and on. But we're never going to give up. We're going to fight. We are going to struggle. And the interesting thing about this issue is it is really diverse. We have white women, Latinos, we have Blacks, we have women who understand the importance of being able to control our own bodies, and we're not going to give up on that struggle.
Well, amen to all that you just said, because I completely agree with you. I completely agree with you. Brian, I'll let you jump in now. You may have a question or two for the Congresswoman.
I do, and I agree with everything you said as well, even though my demographic is obviously slightly different. So we'll say that. But I did, you made some really good points, and Barbara has obviously asked you several questions about some of the issues that are going on. There's so many right now, right? We could do thousands of podcasts on all the different issues, right?
Yes.
And you're talking about the progress being made by women, all women, and then also specifically women of color. When it comes to the media coverage, that's obviously a big thing. When I say media coverage, I'm not just talking about the main network, CNN, Fox, social media as well. What biases? I'm saying what biases, not if there are biases, because we know that there are. But is there a bias in the media that you notice that makes your work more difficult? You talk about undermining some of the things, and I see it. I see it on the various networks. What do you see from your lens?
Absolutely. Let me tell you, as having served as chair of the Financial Services Committee, the media did not always or often contact me on the issues that we were dealing with on a daily basis. I've never had the opportunity to really have the discussion on deregulation. I've not really had the opportunity to have the discussion about how the banking world really works and what we have discovered when we've had to have some of the biggest fines in the history of this country on major banks that have not gotten a discussion in the media. And so what they do is they will cover you when there's a confrontation or when there's something that they think they can get more listeners and watchers to be interested in because it's a fight going on. It's, Republicans versus Democrats, that kind of thing. But on the basic issues that we should be talking with the American public about, we have, for example, a fantastic Consumer Financial Bureau that was created under the Dodd-Frank reforms. And prior to these reforms, consumers didn't really have anywhere to go to register their complaints and to ask for help. But now with the CFPB, they have that. They're doing a great job. The opposite side of the aisle does not like it. They're trying to destroy it. We're in the Supreme Court on some aspect of it now, but we don't get a chance to really educate the public because the media is not so interested in that. They're interested in the fights and they're interested in the confrontations. And so we need more attention to issues educating the public, particularly about financial services. We need to be educating people about home buying and helping them to understand what the down payments are all about and what it means to get certain kinds of mortgages and what it means to buy a home and then the upkeep that goes along with it should be calculated. of these kinds of things that we need to be doing to ensure that people have opportunity, that they can be homeowners, they can get better mortgages, how to shop for them, on and on and on. And so, yes, there is bias in the media, particularly as it comes to, I believe, women and women of color. They go to the same old guys all the time to talk with them about what these members want to, what those members want to talk about. So we're working constantly to get our information out to them and to challenge them and ask for coverage on issues that we think the American people should have access to the information about.
Do you think that bias is intentional, or is it just so ingrained in most media, right? I mean, in other words, how do we kind of change that? I know you're talking about getting out great information. As people, I know Barbara, does a lot with media, watches a lot of the media. I do it certainly on a daily basis. But what can be done, and why do they just think that a woman of color wouldn't know as much, or is it in their mind, or is it something that it's just overlooking, which is either way is wrong? But what's your thought on that?
Well, first of all, in our democracy, we protect the press. And we want the press to have the opportunity not to be shut down as they would be in a communist country, for example, that they have access, that they seek out information. They do not have to disclose who has shared information with them, their contacts. And so they're in a very, very special position, protected by the Constitution of the United States. And that's what gives them the opportunity to operate the way that they do. They know that the members of Congress are not going to try and legislate anything to limit them or to shut them down. And so we have to tolerate them and try and educate them and try to get them to understand how important it is to cover certain issues and certain people and give everybody a chance to be heard. Freedom of speech is not only for them, it's for all of us. And that's what sometimes they don't understand.
Right.
That makes a lot of sense. And Barbara, I want to kick it back to you, but real quick before I can kick it back to Barbara, and we are starting to wrap up a little bit here. So just to let the audience know that we're getting towards the end a little bit. We could keep going on for hours here. This is a great conversation. But I want to I kind of want to ask you both a question, because you're both female leaders. You're both female leaders of color. Congresswoman, you were saying before how Paul's been saying these great things about Barbara. Well, Barbara's been a mentor to me over the years. As well, I've learned a ton from her. We work together at the Chamber of Commerce. Let me ask you this question, and this is really for both of you. What roles I think you have a responsibility, right, going forward. You have platforms, and you both have a voice. How do you leverage that platform? How do you leverage that voice to kind of pave the way for the future of women? So even though we've maybe come a long way and we still have a long ways to go, that maybe 10 years from now, we're having a conversation that we're saying, well, we've progressed even more. Hopefully we haven't gone backwards. But what role do women like both of you play in that? And you can both kind of have that. I'd love to hear that.
Okay, well, Barbara, let me just take a few minutes. I know we don't have a lot of time. This past weekend, I was at a huge event that was given in Watts, California. And it was several nonprofit agencies had come together. They were focused on young girls and helping young girls to get the confidence that's needed to become whomever they want to become. And so these young girls, we talked to them about loving yourself, not letting anybody tell you you're not good enough, accepting your beauty, being able to have a voice and an opinion and to speak up. And they had trained the young girls in a way that they sang about it. They repeated poetry about it. And these young girls were looking very, very strong on stage, all talking about how wonderful it was to be a young woman and how they were going to move forward and how they believed in themselves, all of that. But the other things that we can do in our business, if a company hires all men for their lobbyists and they come into my office, I might want to say, do you have any women that's working in your corporation as lobbyists? I don't see any. Or you also need to express to women out there what things are available to them that they ought to be applying for. And you must always use a part of your presentations, women, and what women are all about, what we're doing, what our desires are. So I'm going to turn it back to Barbara.
Well, thank you. I completely agree with all of that. And I think that we do have a responsibility, Brian, as women and women of color to bring somebody else along. There are a couple of things that I'm involved in where I try to do that. I'm on the board of Conservation Nation, and it is an organization that is trying to get young women, particularly women of color, to get into this field of conservation, because it's not a field that you see a lot of people of color. But we're really focusing on young girls in the Washington area, though it's a national organization, but we're focused on that. And we're having some success with that. We're doing a lot of work in India and where we've got elephants, and we're preserving wildlife and all, but we want to bring young girls and girls of color into that. The second thing, I'm on the board of a publicly traded REIT out of Atlanta, and I chair the Nominations and Governance Committee, and underneath that is something called ESG. And of course, a lot of corporations, and particularly the Republicans, hate ESG. They're going on a rampage against ESG. And why? Because ESG focuses on diversity.
That's right.
And so when you look at the E stands for environmental, the S stands for social, which is where the diversity
That's right.
and the G is for governance. And the only letter that they're very upset about is on the social, because they don't want to do anything around diversity. And so I'm championing. I was the first woman on this board, and still the only woman of color on the board. And I don't come from a real estate finance background. So you talk about your learning curve. I had a steep learning curve because everybody else there was from real estate finance. But where I think I'm making a contribution is, a little bit on the strategic stuff, but clearly looking at at ESG and our diversity. And now we have 3 women on our board. We have 1 other minority male on the board. And so we're making, these are great people, very qualified, but you have to go look perhaps in a different place. You can't do the same recruiting that you always do. And of course, these people are so good and so popular that everybody's looking for them too. So I think, Brian, that's how I think I can make a contribution to help bring somebody else along. It's so important that I didn't get here, whatever I've accomplished, I didn't get here by myself. Somebody helped me along the way. And so it is my responsibility to help bring somebody else along as well.
That's right. Well, Barbara, I want you to know ESG is a big, important issue and subject right now.
I know.
And so it's helping and trying to help corporations to know everybody can participate in dealing with our climate and the climate change. And you're absolutely right. Conservation is what started the education on climate change years and years ago. I can remember being in like the 4th and 5th grade where conservation was an important subject. I loved it. And we talked about soil rotation, for farming and all those kinds of things. But ESG now has come to the point where corporations need to have people that they are bringing in that will help them to take a look at how they run their operation and what they can do to contribute to saving our climate and to saving our earth and to making sure they understand climate change. And so you're right on it. This is one of the most timely, futuristic issues that is being dealt with now. And I know the resistance to it, but when you take a look at California, I'm in a state that's snowing
I know.
and the temperatures are, and rain, and the temperatures are very low, and we have on winter clothes and on. Climate change. We've got to
Right.
do something.
Exactly. You know, I did an interview with Corporate Board magazine 2-3 weeks ago in the article, and I knew, and they called me because I chair this committee on this publicly traded board, and the whole bet was he was anti-ESG, the reporter was. And so I was not the person that they probably wanted on the in their write-up. I got the article a couple of days ago, and it's very anti-ESG.
Yes.
But my comments were put in there. I'm probably one of the lone ones that felt there was a tie to business profitability. And so anyway, we'll leave it there. We'll leave it there. There's lots to talk about. I think my final question to you is, it does not look like you are slowing down anytime soon. So what's next for Maxine Waters?
Thank you very much. It's not so much what is next. In the role that I play, I still feel a responsibility to be a member of Congress who's creating change. When I took over the chairmanship, I created a subcommittee on diversity and inclusion. And I asked it to be served by a very competent Congresswoman, Ms. Beatty, out of Ohio, who's doing a good job. We have a long way to go to open up opportunities in the financial sector and on Wall Street. We've got a long way to go, even in our own government, as we look at the feds and the Treasury and the FDIC and on and on and on. And so my focus is on diversity and inclusion, opening up opportunities for people of color. We have been denied for so long until the wealth gap is huge. And some are predicting that the wealth gap will never be closed. I'm predicting that if we work at it, if we take every opportunity and we understand how financial systems work and how the exclusion takes place, we can close this wealth gap. We owe it to ourselves, we owe it to our children, we owe it to our grandchildren to correct what has been absolutely a distorted way of dealing with us when it comes to finance. And so I've got to stay where I am. I don't plan on retiring anytime soon. And I don't plan on going anyplace else. I'm going to be here. And again, hopefully, by the time I do retire, there will be change and women will have an opportunity to serve and have careers in the way that they've always dreamed about and knew it was possible, but were stopped from being able to accomplish in ways that we're now unveiling and we understand, and we're going to deal with it.
Well, I thank you for that, and that's so critically important. And I know that when you look at today, how many women are in Congress versus when you started, what, 30 some years ago, there's a big difference, and we have gained with a lot more women in the U.S. Congress, and we hope to see many, many more. I think
there are, as you noted, 124 women serving in that 118 Congress, and so it's getting more diverse too.
I know, and it's so good to see, because women bring a different perspective.
Yes.
And that men just don't have, as hard as they try, though many don't try, but as hard as they try, they don't have the perspective that makes for a very well balanced environment. So we thank you so much. I think that Brian is giving me the sign that that's about all the time we have for today. And we also want women, all of our viewers, to celebrate the women and girls in their orbit, because it's so important. And it's not just 1 month of the year, but we cherish and celebrate people, women, every single day. Congresswoman, we so appreciate your being with us today. And we acknowledge and appreciate your decades of public service. And I'm so glad to hear that you're going to be there for a while longer. We cannot afford to lose you. No one is more passionate about doing good for this country than you are. So we thank you so much. And to our viewers, thank you for joining us today. Brian and I are delighted to have you. And that's all for now. Bye-bye, everybody.
Goodbye.